Firstly, welcome everybody this morning. Welcome to our three fantastic panelists, and welcome to everybody who's taking the time out of their Monday mornings to come and join a really great conversation about apprenticeships. Obviously, this is National Apprenticeships Week, and I think this is a really important issue for the Jobs Foundation in a number of different ways. So, as I said, we've got three great speakers this morning: Grace, Rob, and David, coming to us from all three of them different perspectives and different backgrounds. So we've got Grace covering somebody who's recently been on an apprenticeship and has taken those skills and has ventured out into the world of entrepreneurship. We've got David, who runs a fantastic business that has a really fantastic apprenticeship scheme. And we've got Rob, who did some really brilliant work in government driving forward use of apprenticeships. So we've got kind of three different bases, which means that I think this will be a really interesting conversation. But why is this relevant for the Jobs Foundation? If you've been to any of our events or any of our other online events over the last few months, you'll know that we're really passionate about the government's ambition to get Britain working again, to boost that employment rate to 80% and bring 2 million more people into the workforce. I double checked on my way into work this morning, and right now there are 946,000 young people aged 16 to 24 who are not on employment, education, or training. And we really see apprenticeships as being really key in taking lots of these people from economic inactivity and back into the workforce. And as part of this, our second big project for this year is our new best practice report, looking into what is best practice from different businesses and charities to get different groups of disadvantaged people into employment. And we've had many great meetings so far this year, really getting to grips with that with different types of businesses. And something that has really came through in all those meetings is just how vital apprenticeships play in giving young people, but lots of other groups of people, those skills, those experiences, that training that really makes sure people can get back into the workforce and thrive. So in terms of formatting, we've got some initial questions that have been sent in by some of the people on this webinar, which we're going to kick off with. We've got the Q&A in the chat box, so please feel free to pop your questions in there, and we will get to them later on in the session this morning. But yeah, to kick started, I'll let all three of you introduce yourselves. David, I don't know if you want to go first, give us a run through of your background and what the Bristol Port Company does.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Very nice to see you, and thank you very much for inviting me on this panel today. Suffice to say, I'm absolutely passionate about apprentices. Just a very quick entree into the Bristol Port Company. Bristol Port Company has been in private ownership since 1991. And we were the first company to have a formal stevedore apprenticeship scheme. Since then, we've employed 274 apprentices. Currently, we have 136 apprentices on our book, of which 43 of those are currently in the training. And what I hope this webinar will do, hopefully a couple of people will get out there and sort of tease a couple of questions about how we structure it, and more importantly, the benefit we get. But suffice to say, if you invest in your youth, you get huge dividends. And although he's not here to join me, Jerry Mail joined the apprentice scheme in 1992, and he's now our general manager. So it's proof, if ever is needed, is that the sky is the limit, and we have always embraced any apprenticeship that comes through the door to make sure we can unlock their potential. And the potential is to go to the top, as I've hopefully illustrated from Jerry Mail. So thanks for having us or having me, and I look forward to some challenging questions.
I think that's a really nice story to kick off this morning with. Grace.
Hi, my name's Grace Hardy. After sixth form, I went and did an AAT apprenticeship in accounting and finance. I completed that within 2.5 years, and then when I was 21, I left and used all of my qualifications that I got during my apprenticeship, as well as my soft skills, and started my own accountancy firm, which has now been running for just over a year now. I work closely with AAT to promote apprenticeships, and I also host a podcast called the Unconventional Podcast, which Rob was a part of as well, where we like to tell unique and different perspectives of founders and other people.
Amazing. And finally, Rob, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to start off National Apprenticeship Week doing this seminar with the Jobs Foundation that I'm very proud to be working with as the Apprenticeship and Skills Director. And this time last year, I was literally in Cornwall in a tiny little hamlet called the London Apprentice, where I kicked off National Apprenticeship Week, and I travelled 800 miles all the way from Cornwall to Cambridge with Ipswich and ending up back in Harlow, where my previous constituency was. So National Apprenticeship Week is an incredibly important week in the political calendar. And actually, the importance that it has and the status that it has, I think, is a reflection on the huge changes there's been in terms of the apprenticeship and skills revolution we've seen over the last 10 years. But I was previously skills and apprenticeship minister. Apprenticeships has been my passion. It was my first ever speech in the House of Commons about trying to get more schools to encourage their students to do apprenticeships as well as go to university. And I look forward to answering questions about the levy, government policy, the decisions on Level 7 Skills England, and whatever it may be. So thank you to the Jobs Foundation for having me on today. And it couldn't be, as I say, it couldn't be a better way of starting National Apprenticeship Week.
Thank you all. We're very lucky to have all three of you give up your time to come and speak to us this morning. There's lots and lots of policy and case studies and whatnot that we could get into, but I think to kick off, it would be quite nice to take a step back and really think about the role that apprenticeships play and the value that they add. Um, I'll start with you, David. Really kind of on a macro piece, what is it that makes the Bristol Port Company think that apprenticeships are so vital? What is it that really inspired you to build out that great scheme that you've got and invest a lot of time and resource into it?
We have a phrase down at Bristol in the docking world: you can't work above the hook until you've worked under the hook. And what the apprentice scheme allows you to do is to start working under the hook. So obviously it ranges from the level of apprentices, and we do pretty much everything. We do an IT apprenticeship, we do an accounting apprenticeship, we do engineering, we do stevedoring, and we do mechanical apprenticeships. And what you have within those 4 years is the ability for the individuals, both men and women, to get under the hook. So they learn the basics. Obviously, the first couple of years is very much college based, and then as they come out of college, we then make sure that they're integrated with the workforce to actually get sort of into the DNA of a business. And again, the advantage of those type of schemes is only they have credibility, but more importantly, they understand the fundamentals. So when they go further up and get promoted, when the crane breaks down, they have been in their apprenticeship years, up the top, age 18, 19, and 20. And then when they come more senior positions, they've obviously got the empathy for the apprentices that then in turn come under them. So it's that ability to sort of start at the bottom of the organization, as I said in my example before, is work your way through up and the rest of it. And again, the great thing about apprenticeships is the breadth. Again, this is specific to the Bristol Port. It's not just about the cranes. It's not just about the motor shop. It's about now IT. It's about finance. We've even got a police apprentice at the moment working through. So I think people need to think in an organisation, is there any job an apprentice can't do? And the answer is no. In my view, is get there. I think the other bit I'll just make is choose the college you twin with carefully. I have no problems at all in sort of giving a bit of a shout out for Western College. They're a superb example of actually working in really close partnership, and inevitably apprenticeship programs slightly change, they slightly morph, and they're the experts in delivering the training, but hopefully we're the experts in terms of what we want from the course. So choose your provider, but also be demanding to your provider. And I suppose the final bit, and we might get onto that, is the apprentice levy, which I'm a great fan of, but I'm happy to take some more specific questions on that. But the bottom line is get apprentices in, obviously young, invest in them, and then the dividends are huge. I suppose I've got to use a quote. Franklin said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best rate of interest." So I leave that phrase with people out there, but it's absolutely true.
Very nice quote to sit and think about. Grace, from your perspective, then, obviously, nowadays there's a lot of pressure on young people to, follow academic routes and go to university and get a degree, and that's very much the way in which a lot of people are kind of funneled as the way to go on and be successful in a professional career. that's not the route that you went down. You went down the apprenticeship route. Do you want to speak a little bit about but why you took that path and what kind of inspired you to follow that?
Yeah, of course. So in my school, it was sort of an unwritten rule that you would go to university. I remember going home to my mum and saying, I don't want to go to university. For me personally, I'm severely dyslexic. I've always really struggled at school. It's not really an environment that I personally thrived in. And to me, university seemed like an extension of school. At the same time, I also couldn't really afford to go to university. I would have to get a part-time job anyway. So my mum led a level 5 apprenticeship within the NHS, and she said, "Have you thought about an apprenticeship?" And at the time, I hadn't really been educated on them. It wasn't an option that was given to me. So very naively, I said, "I thought they were just in construction and hairdressing." And she went, "No, they're in everything. Go away, do your research, and come back to me." So that's exactly what I did. And when I delved into it more, I found out that you could be paid from day one. You would be put in front of clients from the first day as well. You get to work within a company and be seen as an equal, which I just thought was absolutely incredible. And then on top of that, instead of having to pay university fees, you were being paid to learn. And for me, that was just absolutely incredible. And the learning style really suited me because I learned by doing, and that's exactly what the apprenticeship was. And so me and my mum went to numerous careers fairs to meet with apprenticeship employees and other apprentices. And that's when I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So I went away and applied for a couple of apprenticeships and thankfully got one.
A lovely start to your journey. And Rob, obviously you spent much of your professional career working on apprenticeships policy and the broader kind of educational policy piece. But what was it that first made you kind of think that this is an issue that I really want to tackle and make an impact on? I think you're on mute, Rob.
Yes, unlike Grace, I went to university because my father came here as an immigrant and he was determined to send me to university. But the apprenticeships that are on offer today just did not exist at that time. And if there had been, and I had parliamentary apprentices in my office, I was the first MP to ever employ full-time parliamentary apprentices. If there'd been such an apprenticeship, I would have applied for it. And so it has been, you can now do an apprenticeship in everything from aeronautical to zoology with all kinds of different levels. And you've got law, media, policing, healthcare, you name it, in between. But what really started me off was way back in 2008. I was a parliamentary candidate. I hadn't even been elected to parliament, and I knew about apprentices, but not a lot. And I go into a building in my constituency that to meet some young kids from the Prince's Trust and Catch 22, another charity. And they started talking to me saying they wish they could do an apprenticeship, but there were no opportunities to do so. And even if they were offered, I remember a guy saying to me he was offered one interview all the way in Leeds, and there's no way he could afford to get from Essex to Leeds. So it had a massive impact on me, that meeting. And I came out of that meeting saying, if I get elected to Parliament, I'm going to champion apprenticeships and skills. As I mentioned before, I did my first speech on it in way back in 2010. I championed it as a backbencher and as in my select committee. And of course, I was minister twice for apprenticeships. So it was an incredible moment for me, a credible moment for me. But I've always felt that they were part of the ladder opportunity. They're about aspiration. You climb that ladder, you earn while you learn, you get a good skill, you get a good job. And we know that well over 90% of apprentices who complete their apprenticeship get good skilled jobs usually in the businesses that employed them. And David Ward, I think, is a huge example of that. So to me, I think that they are the answer to so many problems. They're answer to our skills needs. They're answer to our social justice needs in terms of needs as well. And they offer opportunity for everyone in all kinds of professions. Over 700 different professions you can now do an apprenticeship in.
Rob, we speak with a lot of businesses, and what very often comes through is exactly as you say there, that skills gap. Businesses say we have the need for X, Y, Z, but we don't have the pipeline of talent for them, and we're finding it very, very hard to recruit. Do you want to talk a little bit about how apprenticeships can play that role in filling that skills gap for businesses, both in the kind of medium term, but also thinking more broadly?
Yes, I mean, we do have a skills deficit in a number of areas, particularly healthcare and STEM. We don't have enough women doing STEM apprenticeships either. But to me, an apprenticeship, the what it does is it allows companies to train and retrain their existing workers. And by the way, retraining is really important. We shouldn't just see as apprenticeships just for young people, even though that is essential. But it isn't just for young people. Apprenticeships allow lifelong learning. So, for example, you might be dare I say, it's an accountant, because I know Grace is, but you might have your worries that your job may be made redundant by AI, and that company can then retrain you to do cybersecurity. And that actually happens quite a bit. So we must ensure that apprentices allow people to train and retrain. But the advantage of the apprenticeship, especially with the levy for bigger companies, is it makes sure it gives companies that training, the advantage to employ people, make sure that the apprentice has the knowledge, skills, and behaviors needed to work in that organization and get a good skilled job afterwards. And there are, as I say, there are many different levels. You could start at level 2, go now right up to degree level, so you can do higher apprenticeships. And they start really at level 4, level 5, finishing level 6 and level 7. Although there's a debate now whether or not the government are going to get rid of a lot of level 7s, which we may come on to in questions. I think personally, I think would be a mistake. So that is the advantage an apprenticeship can do. The employer knows that the apprentice who becomes a full-time employee is going to have the knowledge, skills, and behaviors needed for that organization, as well as getting the skills that our country needs as well.
David, late last week, my colleague Georgiana and I were down in Portsmouth visiting a great factory that manufactured high-tech connectors and cables that go in these cool drones and tanks and things like that. But one of the things that they spoke about was talent bubbles. So they said, we've got our workforce from, 30, 40 years ago, and we've got great people. They're very skilled, very talented. They've worked with us their whole lives, but they're now getting to that retirement age. And in the interim, companies haven't invested enough in making sure that they've got that long-term talent pipeline. So this particular business has now spent a lot of time and a lot of money building up their apprenticeship program, but it means that they've got this bubble in the middle whereby people are retiring out of the workforce and they've not yet had the chance to train and recruit these new skilled apprentices. Is that something that you've been quite conscious of with your apprenticeship scheme? Is that something that having that scheme there for the long term at the Bristol Port Company, have you kind of managed to avoid a lot of that problem of people aging out of the workforce and not having that pipeline to replace them?
I think we have, but I think I'll go back to Rob's point. I've never heard the phrase talent bubble, actually, and you wanted me. But let me do a bit of sort of myth busting on the apprentice levy. People whinge about the apprentice levy. Basically, they haven't rolled up their sleeves and got engaged with it. I think it's a fantastic scheme, and I think it's indirectly going to answer your question, because it's actually, if I have any criticism on the apprentice levy, it's just the name. Apprentice tends to equal young people, but apprentice really is someone that wants to relearn or reskill and all the rest of it. And we've used our apprentice levy, which we actually seed again with Western College, so they managed the digital account for us. And we've had 44 supervisors and junior managers go through the ILM Institute of Leadership Management Level 3, and we've had 12 of our senior managements go for the Institute of Leadership Management Level 5, so equivalently sort of A levels and sort of degree minus. And that's exactly what has allowed us to do, to get some people, in terms of certainly the supervisor and junior managers, that have probably reached the end of their sort of tool and technical skills, but we've now then needed to sort of morph them into management and obviously the soft skills that go with that. So I think what needs to be sort of considered by companies is apprentices should be seen from sort of 18 through to sort of 50 really, and there are mechanisms to do it. The levy is there, but again, what you need to do is identify what you want from it, then go and sit down with a college, and again, it's an a la carte menu. Decent FE colleges across the thing, they have got so many courses to offer. It does just need a little bit of blending. So for instance, our Institute Level Management 3, we developed it obviously around the maritime narrative, and we inserted a 1-week outward bound and leadership course in it, because again, that's one of the things that we felt that we needed to do for our junior managers who are sort of 35 to 40, to get them away, to put them in slightly in a degree of uncomfort, in order to get the skills in there. So I think that's answered the question in terms of see it holistically and see it through life, rather than just sort of loading at the bottom and then thinking apprenticeship schemes are finished by the age of 22 and 23. So I suppose someone like Grace, go all the way, and there will be other courses that one always can do and can always top up throughout the scheme.
So it's a really interesting point to consider, David. But we'll definitely come back to the apprenticeship levy because I know it's of interest for lots and lots of people. On that kind of Rob and David, you both talked about the importance of learn and the value of learning skills on the job, which you can do on an apprenticeship, but you can't do on other things like a university degree. Grace, how did you find that then? Was that a challenge having to learn all this kind of theory and content whilst also having to consider actually applying it in a real workforce, or was that something that you found quite natural? And how did you balance the challenges and the opportunities of that?
I think it was done quite well within my apprenticeship. So we had 2 weeks of training when we first started, and then we went straight into the field. So it was straight like sitting with clients, understanding their processes and systems, testing, all of that sort of stuff. And then we would go to college in blocks. So usually during an apprenticeship, you either go 1 day a week into college or you go in blocks. So we would probably work for 3 months and then go to college for 2 weeks. That's sort of how it worked. And that was really good because it got to marry up the theory with the practical. So I always left college with a bit more understanding that I was able to apply into the practical. But when I was 19, that's when I started training graduates that have come out of university. And I think university degrees can be really helpful. However, what we found in accounting is that they'd been taught all of the theory, but none of the practice. So we would get a couple of people from university with really big egos going, why are you training me? You're a lot younger than me. I know things because I've got a university degree and you don't. And then we'd put them down at day one and they'd be lost and confused because you have to understand that the theory, especially around accounting, it might be any subject. The theory and the practice are two completely different things. And that's why I think an apprenticeship is so great because you do them both at the same time.
We were over in Belfast actually visiting an accounting firm, and the firm were very, very kind, and they introduced us to part of their cohort of graduates and part of their cohort of apprentices, and that was exactly the point that they made. People that had gone through the apprenticeship route and were years younger, didn't have all the student debt, and were starting to progress in their careers quicker than the graduates that thought they were kind of entitled to progress slightly quicker, which is really interesting to see. And I think that's something that the culture on apprenticeships very much has changed in the past 10, 15 years. A lot of that down to the hard work that you did in government, Rob. But Rob, do you want to talk a little bit about how the kind of apprenticeships are held in much higher esteem now than I think they previously were. They're really, really valued by employers and people alike, and they're very well respected. But do you want to talk a little bit about how that's been the case and how some of the changes that you did in government contributed to that?
Yes, I'd be very happy to. And Jamie, I've just noticed there were a couple of questions come up on the chat. Would you like me to answer those as well?
We will get to them. Don't worry, Rob.
Oh,
I've
okay.
got them coming up too.
Okay. So, well, what has happened? Because there were huge reforms over the last 10 years. Previously, there was apprenticeships weren't always of high quality. Of course, you had the traditional ones, which were, but there was a lot of question about quality. And so I remember going to a hotel where somebody said to me they had an apprentice in their kitchen, and really that person was just doing a summer job over a few weeks. And what we did was we wanted apprenticeships and skills to have the same prestige as as academic education. And what that meant was we wanted to make sure they were quality and the qualifications were designed by employers. So we moved from apprenticeship frameworks to standards. And these are designed by employer groups called Trailblazers that was then presented to the Institute for Apprenticeship and Technical Education. They work together to produce a qualification that employers need, with the aim, of course, that if employers are designing the qualifications, apprentices are more likely to get the apprenticeship and the job afterwards. Yes, it can be a bit bureaucratic and absolutely, I would have some reform. But the principle of it is to introduce high standard employer-led qualifications. The other thing we said was the apprenticeship should be a minimum of a year. And I absolutely agree with that because we need to make sure that the apprentice gets the knowledge, skills, and behaviors. And we also said that it should be 20% off the job training, but that can be done in the workplace. But they have a provider, either it's a college in the case of David's awards organization, or it could be an independent training provider. And 65% of apprentice training is done by independent training providers. But of course, there are brilliant colleges like my college, Harlow College, and others up and down the country doing superb apprenticeship training. And I'd like to see even more FE colleges have that opportunity as well. So the whole nature of apprenticeships and skills has been transformed. The same lay behind the T-level reform to move away from BTECs and alternative qualifications to really tough, high level, prestigious vocational and technical qualifications that students would have work experience in the case of the T level as well, just to ensure that people didn't just go on about A levels, but they actually felt that an apprenticeship or a T level was first class as well. And it's taking a long time. There were teething troubles along the way, absolutely. And of course, there can be changes and reforms, but the principle and the foundations of the apprenticeship and skills reforms have been monumental. The way we now talk about apprenticeships that we never have done, the way that you now, as I mentioned before, you have over 700 different apprenticeship standards that employers know for the most part they're going to be quality apprenticeships, that we now have degree apprenticeships. We've had over, I think, close to 300,000 apprentices doing degree apprenticeships since 2014 when they were introduced. So you get that university experience, but you get an apprenticeship. And now universities, whether it's even Russell Group, like my old university, ex-university, or whether it might be Nottingham Trent University, they hold degree apprenticeship ceremonies. So there has been a huge transformation. There's a long way to go, but the glass is definitely half full rather than half empty.
I can see lots of questions coming in now. So as Rob said, please feel free to use the chat function and send in any questions or thoughts that you've got. Um, David, as you were saying there about the apprenticeship levy and accessing those funds, we had a lot of people write to us beforehand about this, talking about some of the challenges of accessing those funds, especially if you're an SME. David, do you want to talk a little bit further about how you as a company access those funds and your kind of thoughts on the levy overall?
I think I've already said my bit. I mean, I found it unbelievably easy. I mean, we just took our digital account, gave it to Western College to administer, and then have used 100%. As you know, with the levy, once you start to use over 100%, you then start to get some pretty attractive discounts in terms of future training. So, and I've heard people, have difficulty. I don't quite understand why that is. Maybe because they don't quite have the scale. And I think there is a scheme where you can actually sort of group together the apprentice levy. And maybe Rob from the policy side might know more about it. But all I would do is find out what your sum is, because it's worked out on a formula. For us, it's 135k, I think. Find the college you want to twin with, speak to them. They're very happily take that administrative, and it just happens seamlessly. So there must be something I'm missing, I think, or others are missing, because I've literally has been a non-issue for us.
Rob, how did you find that then in your time in government? Was this an issue that came up often? Businesses feeling like they were less able to access those funds?
Well, I wish I had David with me all over the country when I was a minister, because I would have taken you everywhere. But there are great companies like yours that understands the levy. There are some companies, to be fair, smaller businesses who may not understand the apprenticeship offering, although they don't pay the levy. But there is no reason why a big business can't use the levy. And I never understood why some very big retail companies like Tesco, for example, were fundamentally opposed to the levy. And it was very depressing. And I felt that part of it was down that they just wanted to do short skills qualifications rather than a proper apprenticeship. And I think at the time, the British Retail Consortium as well, they had questions about the levy, and I never understood this because when you meet companies like David's and many others, Google, BT, John Lewis, and others who use the apprenticeship levy very successfully, Amazon, a great example, a brilliant employer of apprentices, there is no reason not to be able to use the levy. That doesn't mean there can't be changes. Absolutely. And one other thing that I think you people don't know is that even if big companies have a problem using their levy, you can now transfer 50% of your levy to any other small business. So you might be a big business, you don't want to use all your levy for one reason or another, but you can transfer that and it's still using up your levy. So and then for SMEs now, we pay 100% of the costs from 16 to 21 of the training costs. Employers and providers get £1,000 each every time they have an apprentice. So there are financial incentives in the system. That doesn't mean there can't be more. And I favour a skills tax credit for businesses to try and encourage lifelong learning. That's something I'm campaigning for. But the apprenticeship levy, that it's a Ronseal levy. It does what it says on the tin, and that's why I think it is a great instrument to fund training right across the United Kingdom. By the way, what people also forget, they say, "Oh, well, lots of companies don't spend their levy," but that's not always a bad thing. Of course, I'd like them to, but that money is then taken and it funds the training costs for SMEs to fund the apprenticeship training. That's how the system works. So it's not always a bad thing if big companies don't use their levy because it provides funds for smaller businesses. But of course, I'd like everybody all the companies to use their levy if possible, and more money to come from the Treasury.
All of this sits on the kind of supply side of apprenticeships, for want of a better phrase. On the demand side of apprenticeships, Grace, is there anything you think that businesses could be doing more of or be doing better to encourage more young people to look towards apprenticeships and be applying for them?
I think demand for apprenticeships has increased over the past couple of years anyway. I think I was quite lucky. I started my apprenticeship in 2020. It was highly competitive then, but it just seems to have got more and more competitive every single year. There's only a certain amount of places available, and a lot of young people now are seeing the benefits of apprenticeships, and so want to do them. So I think it's really important for businesses to do things like open days and hold events. It's what we used to do in my old firm. We'd have an evening where prospective apprentices came into the office, we'd give them a tour, we'd sit down with them, answer their questions, go through what course they'd be on, what their day would look like, all of that sort of thing. And I think that's really important because a lot of people understand what it's like day to day to be an apprentice. And I think that's where a lot of young people have questions and how their day is structured and when they go to college. So I think that's really important just to show inside the business.
Definitely. David, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think Grace touched on a really good point. I mean, I think it is beholden on the employer to really make it attractive. For instance, we invite parents and guardians in, because I'm very conscious that we're looking after 16, 17-year-olds, and they want the assurance that we are going to look after their, I use the word children, but young adults, in a good way. So we always involve a chance for the parents and guardians to come and have a look at us, to check that that we are everything we say. The other one, just quickly, I suppose every conversation slightly has to have COVID in it. What we noticed in terms of our last batch and the one before is that there was a cohort of individuals who really had missed out on quite a lot of their sort of social skills and the rest of it because they were sort of locked down essentially for 2 years. So we have put all our apprentices on the Duke of Edinburgh Gold Scheme. I wouldn't say it was universally popular day one. In fact, out of 24 of the apprentices, 22 said they weren't going to do it. 22 have now done it, and they will all be going up to Buckingham Palace this year. And I think that's really important because, again, when you come into an adult workplace, one does need a degree of social skills and all the rest of it. And unfortunately, because school budgets and are under huge pressure, and again, that particular cohort, so going back 3 years ago, so 13 to 15-year-olds didn't have the opportunity to play sport and all the things that most people have had. So I think for the employer, you always need to look and just remember you are in terms of looking employing young people, and one needs to be sensitive to what their requirements are, and you need in sometimes to bolster. I hesitate to use words, the failings of the educational system, because it then starts to become political. But I think there are things that companies can do to boost those young adults, and again, it's with huge pride that the current or the cohort from last year have all persevered. There have been some moments, there have been some tears, but they've now completed their volunteering skills, they've completed their expeditions, and they are definitely men and women with a greater hinterland to go forward to the challenges in the workplace. So I just sort of add those two elements.
It's super interesting. I can see in the comments, Luca and Dan are both asking about the new growth and skills levy and what that might entail. Rob, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the growth and skills levy, perhaps what's been proposed, what might be different from the current system?
Yes, and I see someone's asked about functional skills as well, I think. But on the growth and skills levy, it's difficult to know what the government are planning because they're going to set out the announcement, I think, in the next few weeks, spring, I expect that. But what's happened so far is that Skills England, it hasn't fully been created yet because it's got to be created by legislation, but there's a shadow Skills England, if you like, that has been created. That is kind of swallowing up IFATE, the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. And the idea is to consolidate all the skills bodies that currently exist. It's meant to have huge influence and to be able to knock heads together and to be cross-government. So to work with the Home Office, for example, on skills and the business department. My hope is that it will work like NHS England. So when Simon Stevens rang NHS England, if he said the Prince Alexandra Hospital in Harlow needs a bedpan, the government would then respond. And so it could be quite influential. I think it's going to depend on the leadership of that organisation, to be frank. I don't think it's going to have the same powers as NHS England does. But the direction of travel at the moment, I think they're going to call it a growth and skills levy, but I think it's going to be focused on it's going to be not the 50% that they said that they were going to do in opposition, to move it to 50% skills levy, 50% apprenticeships. It's going to be much less than that. And I think the direction of travel is foundation apprenticeships or pre-apprenticeships. I think companies will be able to do that. And I think they'll also focus more apprenticeship funding on level twos and level threes. But obviously we don't yet know what is going to happen. And of course, focusing more money on level twos and level threes will have effect on level sevens because they want to shift the funding from level sevens to level twos and threes. And maybe we discuss that in a bit.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be coming back to that. I can see that. Or in fact, Rob, do you want to come in just now actually on Ellie's question about your perspective on the functional skills requirement?
Yes. So this is a very difficult one because here's a confession for you. Unlike Grace, who was dyslexic, I had the opposite problem. I love words and letters, but I'm dyscalculus. And so I failed my maths O level the first time round, and I managed by a miracle to get it down to a C after months and months of going into school every day during some holidays. And so I completely get this argument and understand it. But we do have something like 9 million adults who struggle with numeracy and literacy in our country. And is it right that if someone does an apprenticeship, they don't have the relevant maths or English qualification? Because even if that particular apprenticeship doesn't demand it, what happens if they do something else in later life and they'll have been denied that opportunity? We know that if you have some kind of maths and English qualifications, you will get better pay and you'll be better set up for life in all kinds of different ways. And also, we should remember that although, of course, it is a barrier to some people doing apprenticeships, we do know that thousands and thousands of people have done functional skills, maths and English that wouldn't have otherwise done it, who now have that qualification or GCSE. So it is a difficult one. It may be that you could reform functional skills, and I wouldn't have a problem with that. It may be that you embed it in the qualification, and lots of apprenticeship qualifications do have some kind of maths and English embedded in, but perhaps you could embed it in more to show that you're proficient in these subjects. But would I stop it completely? No. I think, of course, it could be employer-led, but as I said, it may be that the apprentice you do in one organization, then you decide 5 years later you want to do something else and you don't have that qualification, might be disadvantage to you. So this is not an to me, it's sadly not a black and white issue. But I think what we should do is look at different options for reform, as I've described. I hope that answers your question, Ella.
No, thank you very much, Rob. I can see that Shelley has asked a question on this, and we also had a few people pre-ask questions on this. So Shelley says that she's heard from various people that the government plans to close down level 7 senior leader apprenticeships. And this is a topic that I think has been quite high up on the agenda when it comes to apprenticeships policy at the moment. The balance and funding between some of these level 7 senior manager schemes and some of the earlier kind of level 2, level 3 early career schemes. David, in Bristol Port Company, what's your balance between the different kind of levels of apprenticeships? Do you offer things like level 7 apprenticeships for your managers, or are you more focused on the early career side of things?
No, we're very much early careers. So I think, well, there's three elements. There's the apprenticeships, as in the sort of 16, 17-year-olds, as I highlighted earlier, in terms of electricians, and mechanics, accountants, and all the rest of it. Then we do level 3, which is the ILM course, and then we do level 5. So that's the highest we've got. We have a very small percentage of graduates actually in the company, so I can't really comment on it. I suppose if there's anyone listening from government on the call and the rest of it, is please don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, the system does work and the rest of it, and there might need a little bit of tinkering, but don't fundamentally change it. Just quickly, only because it was raised earlier about T levels. We've done T levels. They're a success. And again, for someone on the call, the only thing about T levels is you need public transport, because the people who are doing the T levels need to get your workplace with a bit of a challenge in one of our sites, because there's no public transport and they find it quite difficult to be able to actually get there. So it's not against the scheme, but again, if you're going to get, just make sure that you've got links so that school children can actually get to your workplace and back. So not much help on that question, I'm afraid.
Rob, is there anything you want to add on that one?
Oh, are we talking about the level 7s now?
Exactly, yeah.
So, and I think Grace knows a lot about this.
Yeah.
Oh,
Grace, do you want to come in then?
No, I think level 7s are amazing, but obviously the equivalent to a master's degree, which is incredible. A lot of accountants do level 7 apprenticeships because that's how you become a chartered accountant. I think they hold so much weight as well. And what's so good about them is you can use them as an apprentice or when you're upskilling your workers. And obviously, they help to increase your pay. So, the apprenticeship in healthcare that my mum ran was especially for mature students. So, her oldest apprentice was 63, which is incredible because she wanted to be able to increase her salary to be able to provide for her family. And that's why I think degree apprenticeships and higher level apprenticeships are so important.
shall I come in now?
On you go, Rob.
Yeah, so Grace is absolutely right. So first of all, do we believe in the principle of lifelong learning? Absolutely. If we believe in the principle of lifelong learning, then you have to allow people to train and retrain. And one of the best ways to do that is an apprenticeship. And I mentioned the example of accountant cybersecurity, but there are other examples. I have met people who worked in finance who want to go into the health service and be a mental health nurse, for example, or a manager in the NHS. Why should we deny them that opportunity? There is a lot of myths about level 7s. So I just looked up some statistics. 30% of level 7 leader apprentices are in health or social work, 24% in education. 3 in 5 level senior leader apprentices come from 50% of the most deprived areas in the UK. 70% of CMI manager apprentices have families who come from families who didn't go to university, and most of the level 7 leader apprenticeships are in the public sector. There's lots of other statistics like that, because the myth at the moment is just all that the companies are gaming the system. It's just all about graduates, and I don't accept that argument. But even if it was, I don't think necessarily that is a bad thing. And the problem is what we've got now is an either or argument. Absolutely, I want more level 2s and level 3s, but I want level 2s and level 3s that lead to progression. So when I've met too many level 2 apprentices and no one has even told them that they can do a level 3. And that to me is wrong. So I absolutely want more young people, but this is not an either or argument. And just again, talked about the levy. The Treasury do keep a few hundred million of the levy. It's hard to work out the exact amount that they could use to fund the level 3 apprenticeships. But if we want to build up the prestige of apprenticeships, then absolutely level 6 and level 7s are really important. And David Willett seems to say, the previous higher education minister under David Cameron, that it's wrong that so many middle class people are doing degree apprenticeships. Well, I gave you my motivation. I do genuinely think apprenticeships are the ladder for the disadvantaged. That's how I started it all off. But we want middle class people to do apprenticeships. We want aspirational middle class families to do higher apprenticeships, because that also helps boost the prestige for apprenticeships per se. So it's absolutely wrong for, this is where I do disagree with the current government, to get into an argument of either or. We want level 6s, we want level 7 apprenticeships, but we also want level 2s and level 3s. If there was one tweak I would make, which I would be fair to the would be, I think, would answer some of the government's concerns, and that's what I would do, is I would possibly decrease some of the funding for some of the level 7 apprenticeships rather than scrap them completely. And I think that would be quite a good compromise. I'd also tweak the levy so that companies could use more of their levy if they had apprentices from disadvantaged backgrounds, for example, or they had apprentices from areas where we have big skills deficits, like, we talked about earlier about healthcare, STEM subjects, some digital areas, and so on. So you can make reforms, but you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I think there's lots of food for thought there. And if I was Jackie Smith sitting over in the Department for Education right now, I'd be paying close attention to a lot of that. Conscious of the time, we're already a few minutes over. I wondered if all three of you would give one final thought on whether that be your experiences, whether that be policy, whether that be the merits of apprenticeships. If you'd summarize that in one sentence, before we close for the morning. Grace, you want to go first?
What a pressure. No, I think apprenticeships are incredible, and I think that we should shout about them more. There's so many great things that the government and the DfE does, like the Apprenticeship Ambassador Network is a great thing. But just getting apprentices stories out there more is really good.
Rob, do you want to come in? No, I think you're on mute, Rob.
I'd thank you. I'd say that Grace is a great example of the power of apprenticeships. She's now got her own successful accountancy practice. I hope she doesn't mind me saying, at a very young age, and that started because she did an apprenticeship. David Ward is the greatest example you could have of a business that understands the power of apprenticeships and is willing to work with the system rather than against it, and rather than complain about X, Y, and Z not working, just gets on and does it. And it shows what can be done. And to me personally, why I've spent my whole adult life championing this is because it's the biggest ladder of opportunity you could offer any person, whether they're young or whether they are adults. It gets them up at that ladder of opportunity. And the top of that ladder, of course, is job security and prosperity. And that's why I champion this. And as I said, I'm very proud to be working with the Jobs Foundation.
Amazing. And David, you've got the honor of giving the final word on all things apprenticeships this morning.
Evangelize. And what I mean by that is it does take leadership. So chief exec, take one of your best apprentices, find your local school, get him or her to speak, not me as the chief exec, I'm the old fart, and then go and actually get them to find 2 or 3 of their mates to come through the front door, and then also make sure that you've got that relationship with your tech college or your FE college, and from that you will produce many more graces through it. But if you neglect it, your business will simply shrivel. So get out there, lead, evangelized, and you will have fantastic apprentices that will continue to be the chief exec, do a better job than I can, rather than just the general manager.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, to our three panelists for giving up their time to come and speak to us this morning. And thank you very much to everybody that came along and attended to have a bit of a chat about apprenticeships. I can see that there's still a few questions in the chat box. So please do email the Jobs Foundation with any thoughts you have or any insights. We're always grateful for feedback from businesses. It's really valuable in helping inform our policy work and our practical work. And on that note, I will let you all go and celebrate the rest of a very lovely Apprenticeships week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.